Okay, here's a brand new one out of Egypt in Saqarra, where last year they found those mummified animals and stuff at, and a new pit burial. They've been investigating all around it, and they got an excavating machine out there, and you can kind of see behind here some of the equipment where they were able to pull down to a certain point and actually run into structure to where they're dug down into it and found more stuff. They found like four sarcophaguses. We'll get into this. Um, but this one here is shown, and sadly to say, if you look right here, you can tell it's already been opened. And so it's like, well, they've already probably done anything if they were going to do it. But it's kind of a darkened sarcophagus here, and then it's got, looks like gold leaf inlaid and scratched around it, or it may just be that golden paint that they had. And so let's take a look at this. I haven't read through it real well. Treasure trove of discoveries unearthed in Egypt's Saqarra necropolis. The vast archaeological site of Saqarra is located about 30 kilometers or 19 miles south of modern-day Cairo in Egypt, and it's home to some of the earliest and first documented pyramids, like the Pyramid of Unas, the famous Step Pyramid of Djoser, the Serapeum, and the burial place of the sacred Apis bulls in those huge granite sarcophaguses that are there, ranging from the early Old Kingdom to the Greco-Roman era. In December 2018, the BBC reported archaeologists at Saqarra had discovered an exceptionally well-preserved burial chamber, the Wati tomb, and I did a video on it. It showed the people on the walls and stuff, and that was a somewhat elder tomb, containing mummified animals and holy birds. And now the Tourism and Antiquities Minister in Egypt, Khalid El Enani, announced on Saturday via Instagram a new discovery in the sacred animal necropolis in Saqarra, near the highly decorated tomb of Wati and the cachette of sacred birds and animals, reports Egypt Today. So apparently they are finding more and more through this area. Hopefully they'll continue to excavate. It won't be a slow type of thing, and they'll come out with pictures and things like that at first part, and then let investigators investigate it, do some mummy DNA and things like that to it. The Minister of Tourism and Antiquities uploaded photos of himself with an excavation workers at Saqarra on his official Instagram account, showing his team exploring a burial well located next to the Wadi tomb. The archaeologists found a passage that led to a chamber housing 5 closed limestone sarcophagus and 4 wooden coffins. Okay, so it's 5 limestone and 4 wooden, all with human mummies inside from the late pharaonic era. So that's amazing. I wish it was from earlier times and stuff, but pretty amazing. Here's a picture of one of them, and this is like the wood ones. The first ones we were looking at are going to be the granite style, and you can see here that they've taken like a gold leaf and put it over the face and stuff, and they say this is one of the ancient Egyptian sarcophagi unearthed at Saqarra. But you can already see that this thing is just in pieces too, where he's got the lid of it. He's working on the lid of it. He's actually writing on something on the lid, which I don't like that. It might leave an impression into the wood if it's gotten softened over the time and stuff. But he's probably just making notes of whatever it says and everything, that's all. So one of the niches is a huge human-shaped wooden sarcophagus contained inscriptions in bright yellow ink, and around it was a large collection of statues and pottery, including 365 Ushabti statues. Ooh, not 360 in the other, 365 this time. One for every day of the year, huh? Crafted in faience and some featuring hieroglyphs. So we don't apparently have a picture of this here, but this is where they have the faience glass and little hieroglyphs and stuff like that, and it should have their names on it, but they're not mentioning it yet. And I find that a little bit strange, because they should say his name here. This is apparently of the 14th dynasty, or these are people of the whatever, and they've just been kind of bland with it. But it says that they have those hieroglyphs. Small wooden obelisk featuring 40 centimeters, or measuring 40 centimeters tall, about 16 inches, about roughly a cubit, in height was also discovered, and when this artifact is interpreted with the Ushabtis themselves, they together offer an insight into ancient Egyptian cosmology. Well, let's hear it. Well, hopefully this is it right here. Farmers of the other world. The Ushabti, or Shabti or Shawabti, was a funerary figurine used within the death rituals of ancient Egyptian religion, and they were placed in tombs among the sacred grave goods intended to serve the deceased in the afterlife. The ritual application of Ushabtis originated in the Old Kingdom of Egypt, 2600 BC, leading through, and most often they were depicted with a hoe over their shoulder, carrying baskets in their backs. Previous to this time, some of the servants and stuff, they would actually be killed and go to the afterlife with the person if they could afford them, or they were big enough of a dignitary. It looks like it only happened to real higher ups and pharaohs and things, and it happened also in Sumeria and stuff. And then they now have these ritualist type things, and they have markings on them that say that they are ready to work, or something like that. It says on them, and it basically they're one for each day of the year, which is strange. You think they're all working, right? But does one work for each day, and is there some type of calendaring on them? No, but it seems to be symbolic. Archaeologists think that these symbols insinuate a belief that the statuettes would magically come to life and farm for the deceased. And according to Richard Taylor, 2000 paper, Shabti and Shabti dolls' death in the afterlife, hieroglyphs typically appear on the legs, inserting their readiness to answer the gods or summons to work. Yeah, like I was saying. Come on, pictures. Oh, there's a video. Cool. With special about the newly discovered collection of Ushabti is that there are 365, one for each day of the year. Yeah, and article on Ancient Egyptian Online explains that while the lunar calendar was used to calculate dates for religious festivals and rituals, day-to-day life was structured around the solar calendar of 365 days a year, or at least in this point here at the very later kingdom. Each year was comprised of 3 4-month seasons, which we still talk about today, which are named after significant events related to their agrarian lifestyle. So it was harvest and things along that nature. Should we look at this now and then see the rest of it? Sure. Okay, so let's see if we can get this. Oh, I'll have to turn this up. Really? Where'd I put the controller? Okay, not that controller. Where's the other one? Right here. Bzzzaw. That was already fairly loud, but let's go ahead and jack it up here in case they can't talk. Here are little faces, face masks, but oh, just great. Well, I tell you, just to keep the roll of things going, let's go ahead and just reload this page. And a fresh load usually does it. So I fresh load it, and then full open it, and here we go. Right, yeah. Take two. Yeah, that's loud.
Today, the whole world is celebrating the World Heritage Day. During the last few years, we're used to announce archaeological discoveries in big international press conferences with international media, but this year, we are celebrating the World Heritage Day in a different way. If you remember, during the last 2 years...
So, well, that is real neat formation right out here. I'm going to have to Google Earth, try to figure out where that is, but that's real neat, and it looks undiscovered, but somebody's trying to find it over it. This is the new Zahi Hawass, if you will. Take a look at him there. But yeah, and it looks like it's been shelved off, and then there's these little areas. Something looks amiss with it, and especially right in here. But this is the new Zahi Hawass type character onto it. Zahi's taking a side position now, and pretty much he does tours and things like that, and he's a figurehead now, and rightly so. Let's get on with archaeology, right? But it's pretty neat. They found this, and you can tell that they're doing this instead of trying to run a press conference like they did before. They're just going ahead and releasing it with him, and everybody's got the masks on. So this is them been working on it through the quarantine here. Let's go.
We announced big archaeological discoveries from this area in Saqarra called the Bubastera. We announced the discovery of the very famous and extremely well preserved tomb of Wahti from the 5th dynasty, 20.
There it is, and see if I can get it to take that off. So this is the tomb of Wahti, and it shows you like the priest guy is real pale, but the other guys are tan and red ochre, and there's yellow-haired people too, in a couple of the pictures in the bottom right that are over here. But they use that symbology just like everybody else does in the Mediterranean during that time. I mean, the Minoans had red ochre males and pale women. Greeks, I've said this in a bunch of my videos, but you can see that symbology, and it's kind of like priests and women are kept pale, people that wouldn't go out of it, and so it shows this symbology. Also, there's this thing whenever you're in danger, you're always shown to be a warrior symbol and warrior dark, so they always show the pharaoh, who probably wasn't so tanned, although I bet he got some sun and all that stuff, but who knows. I mean, they were extreme sun worshippers, so there's no mentioning of constant tanning, but there is like sunblock that they put on and things like that for workers, because man, you work out in the hot sun all day like that, it's just going to really cook you, and it'll get you a tan that looks like this. But these Shabdi dolls are just real neat. 365 now, and so that kind of redates it a little bit on people thought that they might have switched to a lunar calendar and when 365 was figured instead of some late Gregorian thing, right?
5th century, meters away from the tomb of Wahti, my colleagues in the Supreme Council of Antiquities discovered a burial shaft of 120 centimeter by 90 centimeter of 9-meter depth, and at the end of this burial shaft they discovered 5 limestone sarcophagi, 4 wooden.
You see that one? Well, that one's one of those big ones there, and that one is definitely going to have the effect where inside of that grossly oversized one, there's one inside of it, and then inside of that is one more. Now, quite often there's 4 on those guys, but there are places where there are 3 or just 2, where it has one then another. And in some cases, this thing would have an outside that was even more squared off that was gold, or is this the squared off gold one because it kind of has that on the feet and so on, and then inside, wrapped inside, and then wrapped up, you know, like a cocoon. Neat as hell. Like to get some more pictures of it and stuff, and really like to know who they were supposed to be and which dynasty and what's going on. And then of course it's going to take them a year to come out with the study on the mummies, even if they started right off the bat. So let's continue.
Coffins with human mummies inside. We moved all the small artifacts out of the shaft, and we are now restoring the coffin and the sarcophagi inside the shaft. The work did not finish yet. We are very optimistic. My colleagues in the Supreme Council of Antiquities are continuing their work, keeping the necessary.
And there's a chess piece that's intricate right there that they found. Who knows what they've already opened these things up, so what have they got for that? And surely they put them in some cases and put them in the car, and even maybe armed, like ride back to town with those and then bring them to one room in the museum, and that's considered offline. That's one of those ones that they have to push the buttons to get in and all those things and start to work on it. But we're not going to hear about that until month and a half, 2 months down the road perhaps, and then they'll show you some video of them doing it. It'll be almost brand new, but that'll all be over with already, and they'll be on to the next thing or doing something about it, whether you hear anything really about it anymore or not. And it might be one of those things where they're working on it in the museum and they prolong it through a little period of time, checking it out so it's on exhibit being worked on, like they do at the Smithsonian and things like that. So what else has he got?
Distance and taking all health measures and continuing to impress the world with archaeological discovery.
Oh, so he's talking about how they are mashed up and they're keeping distances from each other and all those things. But literally, whenever you lift the coffin lids off, these people were just shoulder to shoulder with each other. But I'm sure that if anybody had any symptoms in any way, shape, or form, they're not allowed that day to even come out. In fact, 2 weeks, tell us about it. And so they're got to be taking great care. But life goes on, people.
During this time, I wish the whole world all health and happiness, and stay home, stay safe, and experience Egypt soon.
And I'd love to go to Egypt soon. And why don't y'all kick up this archaeology stuff just a little bit and giving people the opportunity whenever we reopen up right here, and then maybe we can find some things that are exciting enough to get some stuff going. You know, if all you got to do, man, if you were to find another King Tut, another Thuya and Yuya and their blonde hair and stuff burial, that'd really impress some people. That'd get a lot of attention and make it open right back up. And your tourist industry's got to be dead now. But if you allowed something like that to go on, it could cause a re-kick in rather than a slow try at coming back. But let's see here. Pyramidion of the solar cycle. Obelisks, or pyramidions, were often erected outdoors as monuments or landmarks symbolizing the power and the consistency of the sun god Ra. However, during the religious reformation of Akhenaten, the symbol was interpreted as a petrified ray of the sun god Aten's, or sun disk, representing the sun god's existence within the stone body of the structure. And if you really look at it in the way that they used them, it's kind of a sundial. In fact, whenever they were taken up into Europe and stuff and used, and especially in Rome, at the Vatican itself, they've got one set up in an 8-spoked sundial that is putting out symbology like crazy to anybody that knows it. Of course, I've talked about Vatica and how that comes from ancient Etruscans and things, which have to do with the Romans extremely and what they got going. So it's all works together a lot. And I also showed that Etruscan that was like, where are we at? And it showed him looking like a Buddha, looking like a scribe out of Egypt or something, and hard to guess really what that came from. Yeah. And so there's a reason for that. So different one, this is probably Khnum, and then the other one they showed like this had a greenish face onto it, and more of a two plumes going up and so on, and that would have been Osiris. So they would have had a series of them. He's got 365, but then there's another series of them that are like 12 that have made a little bit bigger, and they're not made like regular shabtis or like this, or like the regular sarcophagus, but they're made like the thicker, bigger one, and even though they're toy size, they're a little bit bigger and thicker too, and they significate the gods and the things like that to go along with them, to say that they're with them too, they're with them in the afterlife and things too and stuff. So obelisks were generally erected to commemorate individuals or events, honoring the gods for associated success, and according to ancient encyclopedia, the ancient Egyptians started creating obelisks at some point in the early dynastic period, some 3150 to 2613 BC, prior to the construction of the step pyramid of Djoser. So it was somewhere before Djoser, 2670. So you could really say 2700 BC or before, and it looks like they were somewhere in the middle of that range, started to be utilized. But the original form of it looks like it was stele shaped and being faced to the sun, and the points right would show you as it went around, it would make a weird looking little shadow that could be used also. But there's not like a usual sundial put around these things or anything like that. Maybe in some weird way you're just supposed to know the way everything's lined up, and you'll be like, okay, it's about 1:32 o'clock with the shadow that goes on it. Interesting thing about that shadow, that's how they found out the circumference of the world. For down in Syene, there was supposed to be no shadow, and down here where the Greek was looking at it, there definitely was a slight shadow. He measured the variance of that, and then knowing how that fits on a ball, so they knew the world was round, how that fits on a ball, what the degrees would come out to be, and then you would have to get a scale. So he had somebody walk it off and pace it for him, and it comes out roughly, what, 800 kilometers and so, or 800 miles. And so they could figure out that it was real close to 40,000 miles around in circumference and everything. And it's not off by very much at all. It took us still a couple hundred years ago before we got it pinned a lot better than that. It's thought that the earliest obelisk served as a kind of training for working in stone and monumental projects, which was a necessary step towards pyramid building. But in the context that the new 40 centimeter 1689 model was discovered amidst 365 Yashabi, it represents the sun and his associated god, the mighty Ra. And whenever you look at these things, it's got a pyramid on top of it, but then it's the shaft of light, and so it's like the pyramid is sitting on a shaft of light, and this magic goes on in between it and down. And they've got all these sacred writings that go down onto it. That's got a magic all of its own. Well, let's see, that's a cool green color they've got on this, but that was probably that blue that turned green, because they've got the blue here too. No, there's a green and a blue, and a green and a blue. That's it, yeah. So that looks pretty cool. You can kind of tell that's just a pale statue, pale person too. So this probably in for a female. Who knows? It may have been a mimic. You could think of something as one of the craftsmen or whatever in practicing for something big. They were making smaller ones. This is made out of stone, but carved intricately to be mimic of one that already exists for practice work. And it's thicker at the bottom than it is the top, although it fits to the pyramid perfectly and stuff. And so there's a lot of geometry and things that goes along with this, and being able to make one stand plumbed up and the whole idea that goes with it. And so I agree that definitely could be training practice used, but that one right there didn't look like training practice. That almost looked like what was probably said at the front of the class, and they go, like this, kids. The secretary and counselor of the sun god was Thoth, who according to ancient Egypt Online was the one who made calculations concerning the heavens, the stars, and the earth, and the reckoner of time and of seasons. He was a mathematician, an astronomy guy. Thoth is taught us, the Phoenician is supposed to have taught writing around to them and stuff, and other people. People say Hermes Trismegistus is thrice, and how he's pulled off 3 different incarnations of himself and so on, and there's all this esoteric knowledge that goes with Hermes. And then of course there's the modern thing where they talk about the emerald tablets, but that's a much later thing, unless they reincarnated again and shipped a special tablet that nobody can find. Regardless of that, the secretary and counselor of the sun god Ra was Thoth, though. And you can see that's the ibis-headed guy. And the writing, the original scribe, is the way this works out too. But a scribe not only was just the artist to draw something, but had to be smart. He had to know all the crap and do it. I've got a video on scribes, and it talks about how they know how to mix colors that are insoluble in water and do not fade over time, and do all this stuff. And he ain't gonna tell nobody, but it passes it down to his kid, his first, from one to the other as it's done. And the scribe's got these crystal blue eyes. It's cool. It's a kind of a new part for Egypt, because it literally looks like a real human blue-eyed glass lens. And it's the way that they make them and stuff. And they find that all through the earliest dynasties, they've got a bunch of those, and they never use it anymore. It seems to be a lost art leading into the later stages of it, though. But he was the inventor, supposedly, of the 365-day calendar, which replaced the inaccurate 360-day calendar I was talking about before, or the moon calendar, which sets it up with 11 days missing. And the year didn't used to necessarily end at December, but could end in different places. And people have often pointed, and I did myself, that whenever September 11 comes up, that's the starting of the new year leading into harvest. It rose all the way around, and some cultures had that for a time, and there was an 11-day period there, so there might be a reason for that to have been a key idea, you know. Together, the 365 Ushabti and the obelisk represent the days of the solar year and the sun of this world, and it is beautiful to see them surrounding the coffin of someone who is now under the light of another sun in another place and time. And I agree and concur with that. So we'll talk about that more, and as we go into summer here, we'll start summer's sun worship again. And I don't know if you saw the one last year, but I started off with Will Ferrell and his old sunburnt and stuff, and Hawaiian music, and man, I could use a glass of lemonade because we were already breaking 100 here in Texas, and we're about to do it here too, although it's right in the 80s right now, and oh, just so crisp in the mornings and warm during the day, and pretty good stuff. Pretty good stuff. So I wonder what we're going to find out of this, guys, but I'll stay on top of it, see what I see that can come from it. One thing I noted right off the bat, though, it seems like they've already opened them all up before they even really show anybody. They don't have any initial pictures or anything that goes along with it, or a listing or a pictography that I can find of all the stuff from in the tomb. If anybody does know about it, put it in there. I'm usually rifling through my stuff, and we'll take a look at it. On to the next one. Peace. Hotep.